This is amazing. For many weeks, I've been watching this one guy on YouTube called Portland Andy. He's some guy that walks around the city. He live streams. He does in real life stuff. He cooks. He rolls a blunt and smokes it and does a couple dabs. And he always has a bunch of 9 different screens up of different riots going around the country, mostly from his hometown of Portland. Trust me on this. It's happening. It's very easy to basically confirm what Andy, I guess we'll call him by his first name, is stating that what's going on in Portland. Many different times he's walking downtown, seeing all the graffiti, the burnt out buildings, the broken windows, the rioting. He actually was almost attacked. He actually had to run away. I think it was another guy. He was he's I think he's more left of center, but he's not like Pol Pot. He's not Stalin or Lenin. He's just an average guy. I think he's about to get married. He seems like a decent dude. He doesn't like all the rioting. He doesn't like watching the city getting torched. But you got some idiot, some nincompoop, some cretin named Jerry Nadler, and I think we all know who this knucklehead is. He basically said violent Antifa riots in Portland are a myth. I think Portland Andy would like to have a talk with you because he sees it every night. As well as I do. There's another guy named he does he says Space McG. He's just a cartoon character and he does it's obviously he's not a cartoon character, but his avatar is a cartoon character, and his YouTube channel is like Geekcraft Studios, and he always shows he pops up on YouTube and does a live stream every once in a while because that's what he does. And again, he's not a conservative for the most part. He's left of center, but he's not Pol Pot, Lenin, and Stalin. He just doesn't like seeing, violent riots like most sane people out in the world. We don't like to see this crap. But you got some people like Jerry Nadler says, this doesn't exist. Then why do we send federal law enforcement to protect a courthouse that's being constantly trying to be burned down by these idiot rioters out there? This whole BLM thing has gone out of control. Its first main focus was police misconduct. Now it's we need to destroy the Western way of life by destroying the nuclear family. And what else? Well, we need Marxism because the leaders of the BLM movement, the actual leaders of the actual BLM movement are Marxists, or I should say in their own words, trained Marxists. If you're a trained Marxist, you're a Marxist. So with the story here, Jerry Nadler, of course, claimed without evidence on Sunday that the violent Antifa riots in Portland were a myth. Now, to say these violent riots are a myth, I guess we can't trust our lying eyes, right? When you see people trying to take a acetylene torch and cut through a metal fence, a barrier, that's not a riot. That's peaceful protesters. Nadler's remarks directly contradict video evidence that is widely available on the social media and contradict what the Department of Homeland Security says is happening in Portland. The violent situation in Portland has witnessed for the past 8 weeks continues with violent anarchists rioting on the streets as federal law enforcement officers work diligently and honorably to their own detriment to their own health to enforce federal law, defend federal property, and protect the lives of their fellow officers, DHS said in a statement on Sunday. As federal officers left the courthouse to respond to attacks on the fence, just like on previous nights, they were met by rioters with hard projectiles, mortar-style fireworks, lasers that can cause permanent blindness, etc., etc., etc. Over the previous 24 hours, such assaults have resulted in at least 14 federal officers injured. Again, what these people don't seem to understand is that your taxes, well, in my opinion, they will have to go up because these people are going to be on unemployment insurance, not unemployment, but workman's comp, because in the focus of their own jobs, they're getting injured by rioters. These aren't peaceful protesters like these idiots out there will have you believe. Nadler was approached by a journalist Austin Fletcher, and asked if he disavowed the violent riots. It is true there's violence across the whole country, Fletcher said. Do you disavow the violence from Antifa that's happening in Portland right now? There's riots. That's a myth that's being spread only in Washington, D.C., Nadler claimed without evidence. About Antifa in Portland, Fletcher pressed. Yes, Nadler once again claimed without evidence. A person with Nadler, presumably an aide, rushed in to get Nadler away from the camera, as per usual, and took him to a car nearby. So there's videos everywhere online, Fletcher said as Nadler walked away. There's fires and riots. There's throwing fireworks at federal officers. DHS is there. Look online. It's crazy, Mr. Nadler. And of course, Jerry, that fat piece of crap. I'm talking about his head. He's still a fat piece of crap in general. But, again, and you see this nincompoop here. Dozens of people have been arrested during the violent riots in Portland, which have been going on for nearly 60 consecutive days. I think today's 60. Department of Justice said in a statement last week, according to court documents since May 26, protests in downtown Portland have been followed by nightly criminal activity, including assaults on law enforcement officers, destruction of property, looting, arson, and vandalism. The Hatfield Federal Courthouse has been nightly targeted of vandalism during events, protests, and riots, sustaining extensive damage. And I think I got a ballpark figure of about $50,000 in property damage. Imagine that. Who's going to have to pay that? That's right, Oregon. Or, broadly speaking, all of us, because these complete frickin' douchebags out there are trying to kill people. And let's don't make no bones about it. There's been a lot of deaths ever since George Floyd had been killed by the cops, or Derek Chauvin, more likely. This is what's going on. They want deaths. And we saw that in Austin, where some Antifa or fellow traveler Antifa, we don't really know what happened, but we do know that he got dead because he tried to aim into a car. Whether he fired at the car or not first doesn't really matter. He's dead because, well, in Texas, you just don't aim a gun at somebody and expect not to get shot. Stuff like this happens. Normally, in a normal situation, this maybe possibly wouldn't have happened, but since everyone's out there open carrying during these riots and protests, yeah, stuff like this is going to happen. U.S. Marshals Service deputies and officers from Federal Protective Service, Homeland Security Investigations, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection working to protect the courthouse have been subjected to nightly threats and assaults from demonstrators while performing their duties. Duty. Acting Department of Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf added on Twitter yesterday, Day 56. Last night, 6 DHS law enforcement officers were injured in Portland. To be clear, criminals assaulted federal officers on federal property, and the city of Portland did nothing. It's time Portland joined the other responsible cities around the country to hold off criminals accountable and protect federal property and officers. Yeah, you think Ted Wheeler, that frickin' soy boy douchebag, isn't going to do anything? No, he is not. And as you see there, every night, that's what they'd leave. The kind of trash they leave there. And, of course, they cut down the fence and they got to put it back up. So what we see here now is a big, I don't know, don't believe your lying eyes. Those violent protests out there don't exist. Those people with an acetylene torch, that was a mirage. You don't need to believe that. Jerry Nadler said it doesn't exist out there because Jerry Nadler is a fellow traveler for the Antifa because he's too scared to stand up to them. It's like some Republicans as well. Some Republicans have actually stood up and said, hey, these guys are terrible and they're violent human beings. But a lot of Republicans are just sort of staking back. Even myself, I'm not involved in it. Like I said, I'm in a South American country. I have no dog in the fight per se, other than I'm an American looking from the outside. Sooner or later, I am going to go back to the States. Maybe sooner than later. Who knows what's going on right now? However, what's going on right now is there's riots. There's people out there going crazy. Why are they going crazy? Because reasons. I think that the peaceful protests at first against police brutality were a noble cause. They've devolved. These people aren't right. These people are rioting because of other things. They want to tear down the Western way of life and bring in Marxism or communism or socialism. It's gone beyond that. What we see now is people just wanting to watch the world burn.